lives were stolen. 2 of them really just beginning. It was done for the infamy of it. Your crimes do reflect permanent incorrigibility, and I will sentence you to life without parole for each of the malice murders that you committed.
That is Barrow County Superior Court Judge Nicholas Primm yesterday informing Colt Gray that he will spend the rest of his life in prison with no chance of parole for his role in the Appalachia High School shooting. Joining us now to explain why the judge chose the maximum sentence is criminal defense attorney Joshua Schiffer, who is not affiliated with this case. But Joshua, you've been watching the sentencing hearing like so many of us. So let's start with this decision. When you consider everything that was presented during the 3 days of testimony, what most likely convinced Judge Primm to eliminate any possibility of parole here?
Judge Primm was quite explicit, as is appropriate, in specifically setting out the justifications he relied on in order to exercise his discretion in applying life without parole, one of the most rare sentences out there in juvenile court. You heard him specifically note the permanent incorrigibility, which infers naturally an unlikelihood of any change substantially in this young man's life during his sentence. That's really the gold standard that the court is looking for in the dicta that the court's going to include in its order, and is the basic justification for life without parole, a sentence only appropriate for juveniles when that standard has been reached.
Yeah, we heard the judge say that it's very, very rare for him to sentence someone that young to life without parole. And we saw Colt Gray plead guilty to every single charge. Why did the judge apparently view that as something other than maybe genuine remorse?
Well, I believe the judge really took to heart the extensive evidence and testimony he heard from after the plea was begun. Back on this past Friday, both the state and the defense submitted a stipulated agreement that there were these certain facts that justified and made the entry of the plea on all 55 charges appropriate. So the judge had this disc, this thumb drive that included all the facts, and the state and defense agreed on them. Then the court heard both the victim impact statements as well as specific testimony from both state investigators establishing why the state was asking for life without parole, and then most importantly, the mitigation defense offered by, Colt Gray's team. We heard from his grandmother. We heard from a school psychologist extensively. And during that testimony, the judge and the litigants seemed very concerned about Colt Gray's mental health. Mental health never became a fully functioning defense of not guilty by reason of insanity in this case, but the defense relied on the untreated and apparent mental health issues in an effort to convince the judge that life without parole was inappropriate due to potentials that he could improve, that Colt could see a more regulated life with appropriate treatment. The judge compared that to the harm done, the permanence of that harm, and the apparent forethought planning. Judge was very specific about how this was not done contemporaneously with the day. It was planned in advance, and that's what justified the finding of permanent incorrigibility, which justified life without parole.
All right, let's look ahead to Colt Gray's father, Colin Gray. He's set to be sentenced tomorrow. Does Colt's guilty plea or life sentence without parole in any way affect the separate proceeding that we're going to see tomorrow?
That is a completely separate and distinct hearing, but these two cases are so naturally intertwined. The Colt Gray sentencing and disposition was needed before Colin Gray's case can most effectively be sentenced. And we're going to see that now tomorrow. I believe the judge wanted to see what evidence would be developed in Colt Gray's case to see how it should affect his consideration for the father. Now that that's submitted, the court is willing to go full steam ahead with the sentencing of Colin because it has all the connected information, even though those are separate and distinct prosecutions.
Yeah, and quickly before you go, a lot of people will be watching this case really across the country because it does have some legal significance with a father or parent now being held criminally responsible for something that their child did.
Yeah, this was a Georgia novelty. It's only the second in the nation, and certainly everyone's watching what happens in the future.
Absolutely. Joshua Schiffer joining us live this morning. Thank you so much.